What's up, guys? It's Ben from 2020 Election Predictions. And yes, you did notice I changed my name from Election Predictions 2020 to 2020 Election Predictions. I think it just comes off the tongue easier and has a better ring to it. So just jumping right in, what my video today is going to be is predicting the 2020 election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden using demographic controls. And mainly, I'm going to be looking at the turnout and the election results among different demographic groups from the 2016 election, and then kind of analyzing how they might change in the 4 years that have just happened to tell you how that will change the election. All right, so the first website I'm going to use is this one made by Aaron Bykoff and David Wasserman over at FiveThirtyEight, which is created by Nate Silver, of course. And this election came live October 5th, 2016, so before the 2016 election. And this was basically their way of analyzing how demographics were going to affect the 2016 election. This was their predictions. This was their prediction for the 2016 election that Hillary Clinton would win by 5 points in the popular vote and win the Electoral College by like over 100 electoral vote margin. Obviously, they were wrong. Most pundits had it wrong, so I don't blame them for this, but I think they actually have a pretty cool setup right here for predicting what the election might have been among different demographic groups. And I think what they really estimated was the non-college educated white turnout. I think this was a lot higher than a lot of people anticipated. And this is what propelled them in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And for our purposes, I'm just going to be classifying it by gender because that was the best exit polls I could find by 2016. So I'm going to see if I can replicate what the actual results of 2016 using these controls and comparing it with actually exit poll data. So let's just start here. So let's look at white women. So 52% for Trump. And I'm going to take some liberties with this other no answer over here because I bet that some of these people actually voted for Trump or Clinton. So let's just go with I'm going to go with 55% Republican here. So that's actually exactly how they had it. Let's see. For white men, so 7% no answer. I'm going to go 66% for Trump actually here. I know this is going to really affect it. Yeah, so I mean, that's actually what we're kind of looking for. And then I forgot to actually do this for the white women, but here this is from Pew Research. These are the turnout rates among races. So it's 65% among whites, about 65.5%. And because women tend to turn out at a higher rate than men, I'm going to do this at 66%, and I'm going to increase this to 65%. So there you go. So next up, going to African Americans. 89%. I think that's actually right. So let's go to 89%. And what was their rate? So it actually went down from 2012. I bet that was mainly because Barack Obama, who was very popular among African Americans, was not on the ballot. Hillary Clinton was not nearly as popular. So was it about... All right, we'll just go this up to 60, round up to 60. And then so let's go among Latinos, 66. The 6 is kind of large here, so let's just call it an even 68%. And their turnout rate was 68%. We'll round that up to 48%. Jeez. And then Asians don't take up a large percentage of the voting population. Just call it 68. And I believe, I remember from before, it was 49%. And the third-party vote was actually around 4% here. So let's see if this did it. So actually, we're getting pretty good data. This is actually pretty close to what it was. If you remember, Donald Trump got 306 electoral votes. So this is underestimating him. I guess the states that are wrong here are Wisconsin and Michigan. Those went to Donald Trump. Oh, and Iowa. Wow. And then they gave Donald Trump New Hampshire and Virginia when Hillary Clinton actually won those states. So this is definitely an imperfect mechanism. But just going forward to the 2020 election, how I think these things might change. I'm going to reset this actually. And I'm going to do it among, I'm going to split the whites by college education because I think this is actually what matters. So definitely, I think we'll see a larger turnout among non-college educated voters. These are kind of the blue collar voters who were not very politically engaged that I think Donald Trump kind of drove out to vote. And I think that they voted for Donald Trump in larger margins than Hillary Clinton. And I do think that they're going to stick with Trump. I mean, you've seen a lot of these interviews in communities, and they still approve of the president. So I think that they will probably go 63% for Donald Trump. I mean, I think they went around 65% in 2016. So I think about 63% is reasonable. And let's just put turnout to around 60%. For college educated whites, with Joe Biden as the nominee, I mean, obviously this could go either way. I think if Donald Trump was against just a generic Democrat, that he would do a lot better. But I think Joe Biden does have a lot of negatives against him. I think this could maybe only help Donald Trump a little bit. I think people were a little bit surprised at how well Donald Trump did among whites in 2016. So let's just keep this at 56%. And I could actually see turnout being a little bit lower among college educated whites, just because they see two options that they don't really like. With African Americans, I could see. I just reset this actually, so I think the African American turnout will rise to probably around 63%, maybe 64%. But I do think that African Americans will not vote at the same rates as they did for Barack Obama, even though that Joe Biden was Barack Obama's vice president. Then among Latinos, I think their voter turnout is going to increase, but also I think Donald Trump is going to win some of those voters. Like obviously, kind of the default is that Hillary Clinton would have done a lot better. So I think I'm going to adjust these a little bit to the right just to make it a little bit more fair. And Asians, I really don't know. And I think this third party vote's probably around, it's probably right around 2%. And so, as you can see, obviously, this is probably not going to happen. I don't see Donald Trump winning Virginia, but I mean, other than that, I think these margins are actually pretty realistic. I think that Donald Trump will, based on these projections, he's going to win, but by an even narrower margin than he did in 2016. And I think this is pretty likely. Obviously, it's very unpredictable at this point, but I do think this could be a likely outcome. And just going over to this tab right here, I think it's pretty interesting. It breaks down the Electoral College based on the different demographic groups. As you can see, people of color, they don't even break that down among African Americans, Asians, or Hispanics, just because they would all be blue. And that's not to say that all people of color vote Democratic, but that's just kind of how the Electoral College works with the winner take all. But I think what will be really interesting to look at is college-educated whites and white women. They're kind of the largest demographic groups when you do break it down by race and gender or by race and education. And as you can see, it's the closest with them. Although Donald Trump has a slight advantage on these, I think this advantage has been narrowing over the years as demographics have changed tremendously. And just an early look at this is an article by Pew Social Trends, an early look at the 2020 electorate. So the electorate, even from 2016, is going to be massively different. So as you can see, Hispanics are going to be the largest um, gain in percentage among racial groups. So they went from 11.9% of the voting population probably to around 13.3% of the voting population. And this is, of course, of eligible voters, not for people who actually turn out. So if we look at the exit poll once again, 71% of the voting population was white. I don't really know what it was for the eligible voters, but for eligible voters, as you can see in 2020, it's going to be 66.7% white. And I predict it will probably be around 69% white when it's the actual voting population, because as we saw from here, whites have the highest turnout rate, except for in 2012 when African Americans did. And then also just going down, I think it's interesting just by generation. So it looks like that Gen Z, which is my generation, is going to have the biggest increase, and that the silent generation and the boomer generation are declining. So definitely Gen Z will have a huge impact on this election if they turn out to vote. Obviously, this is eligible voters, and younger voters tend not to turn out as high. But one message I would just have to the Republican Party is to kind of look at the long term. I mean, of course, 2020 is right in front of us, and they should just probably keep sticking on to what they're doing just to see how that works in 2020. But going forward, I definitely think that they should try to reach out to voters, for millennial voters and Gen Z voters, and then also just voters of color, especially Hispanics, because they're growing at massive rates. And I do think that they can appeal to these groups, but I don't think they've done it effectively thus far. But I think there is room to improve there. And I will put all the links to these websites that I did. I think it's pretty interesting. I would encourage you to play around with them. And please comment what you thought about this video, or if you thought I didn't do something right, or if you want me to do something different next time. Please leave that in the comments. And if you haven't, please subscribe too. Thanks, guys.